So, I am going to explain to you why it is important to tell our story. And we have our guest, Professor Marilyn Turner, sitting by. So, our voices scribed into books are powerful. They are ours, our spirits, inner workings, and imaginations poured out into paper. It belongs to us, deeming it necessary to be told by us, claimed and protected by us. Our stories are written legacies, open books to our hearts, courage, and vulnerabilities that we place out on shelves to be stored in and out of our minds. It is not written to collect dust or to be banned or written because we simply can. We write because we have a say. We write because our passions, thoughts, moments, and ideas, experiences, and legacies wants to surpass us, to survive. Be it a love story, a mystery, science fiction, poetry, or autobiography, or comedy, it is ours to introduce, to connect generations to one another, an abstract blueprint, a cheat sheet on how to solve life's problems, to bring forth not agreement but understanding or clarity to experiences we may never face or simply reveal our commonality. Some are like cookbooks, adding that missing ingredient you never thought of, as well as to instruct one not to add too much salt and how to balance that honey. Our stories, our books are also written ammunition that would behoove one to tote. Some are straight lessons to warn us to keep from those insane acquiescent sagas. Nevertheless, important not to tell it is important not to only tell our stories, but to handle and control our stories, the unedited truths, richness, our literary and mental pictures. But most importantly, to inspire generations of all ages or class to craft unthinkable, fresh, and unbought thoughts with a foundation that their words are important, necessary, and worth telling. And so, with that being said, I would like to introduce Professor Marilyn Turner. She will be leading us in a conversation and discussion of the legendary life of literary works of Zora Neale Hurston. Um, so Zora Neale Hurston came out with the book Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick and a 2020 publications of works of Zora Neale Hurston. She will explore the lives of Hurston, the artist, how her race, gender impacted work, and her legacy as a writer. And as a whole, I'm going to give the mic or the space to Professor Marilyn Turner and let her share her perspectives.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I wasn't sure. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is Zora Neale Hurston, as Nzima said, but I wanna distill it down to one particular point, and that is, why did she write? What compelled her to go forward? What compelled her to write? She didn't get rich off of writing. She didn't make a living off of writing, and she died in poverty. So why did she write? All right. And I'm not going to say that I'm going to have an ultimate answer at the end, but it's just something that I like to explore with authors. And it's an answer that works for me. Okay. So I've always been interested in authors and the impact that their life's journey has had on their work. Okay. No matter what type of writer you are or there is, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whatever it is, there's a bit of their own world experience and worldview in their work. It's impossible for that not to happen. So Zora Neale Hurston, she was born in Alabama. I can never pronounce the name of the small town, on January 7th, 1891. And she died in 1960, and she was only 69 years old. So she was fairly young. She died, it was she was born just 26 years after the end of the Civil War, and it was 14 years after Reconstruction. She was one of 8 children. When she was a tiny little girl, about 4 years old, her family decided to move to Eatonville, Florida. Her father was a Baptist preacher and a carpenter, and her mother had been an educator or school teacher. One of the things about Eatonville, Florida, that's very interesting, it was the first incorporated Black township in the United States. So think of this, little Zora moves to this town where everybody looks like her. People who are in charge, they look like her. The mayor looks like her. The judges look like her. The policemen look like her. So I think this probably gave her a really good sense of self. Okay, so things went well with the family and they flourished until Zora was about, I think it was about 14 years old and her mother died. All right, her father remarried. And the woman he remarried was a younger woman, and she and Zora did not get along. Zora goes off to school. I guess her father shipped her off to school. She was there for a while and something happened. I don't really know what. He stopped paying her tuition. She has to leave school, and she has a variety of jobs that she pursues, to keep herself afloat. Finally, she moves to Baltimore with her sister. She gets to Baltimore and finds out that, all children, I guess below the age of 18, are allowed to have a free education. They're entitled to a free education. At this point in time, Zora is 26 years old. So, but she wanted to go to school because she hadn't finished and she needed to finish high school. So she says that she's 16. She just lops a decade off of her life and says that she's 16 years old. And apparently people believed her because she goes to high school. Okay, just think about that. I don't think if I took 10 years, told people I was 10 years younger that they would believe it. But think about that. She did it and she got away with it. I think that's pretty fabulous. So, all right, she goes on, she finishes high school in Baltimore. She leaves, she goes to Washington, D.C., and she goes to Howard Prep. From Howard Prep, she goes to Howard University and gets an associate's degree. From Howard University, she moves on and she goes to Barnard College in New York City. And ultimately, she studies for her PhD in anthropology at Columbia University. All this time, she is writing. She's a writer. She's writing. And as a matter of fact, her first short story was published in 1921. It was called John Redding Goes to Sea, and it was published in the literary magazine at Howard. Okay? But from 1917 through 1935, this woman energetically pursued her education. So here we have it, Zora, with a name like Zora. I mean, think about it. She sounds like a superhero, doesn't she? She's my superhero. She's Black, she's female, she's smart, she's audacious, she's bodacious, and she's a force to be reckoned with. All right. And I think, my personal opinion, this is like, she's part of the Harlem Renaissance, right? So she's around people like Weldon and Baldwin and, Gwendolyn Brooks and Claude McKay and Toomer and all these people. And I, in my own mind, this is my very own opinion, in my own mind, I often think that she probably intimidated the men. I have nothing to back that up. That's just my opinion, but she probably did. Okay, one thing about Zora, everybody knows her, one of her best known works is Their Eyes Were Watching God, right? So Zora wrote Her Eyes Were Watching God in 7 weeks while she was in a Guggenheim Fellowship to Haiti. I'm always amazed at that. She wrote this novel in 7 weeks. 7 weeks is not a lot of time to do much anything, let alone write a book. But she did. And that's because she was brilliant, right? You have to be brilliant to write a book in 7 weeks, and she was. So we get back to the question. Why did she write? And one of the things that always comes to my mind, I have to check my notes here so I make sure I tell you the right thing. But one of the things that comes to mind for me is the fact that she's an anthropologist, okay? And as an anthropologist, she's interested in people, in society, and how things work with people. And think about that. She's an anthropologist and she's interested in the study of people, but she's an author, obviously writing about people. I think the two go hand in glove. Okay. And her stories contain aspects of like social anthropology, which would be patterns of behavior for people and cultures. Think about that. Patterns of behavior for people and cultures. Think about what she writes about. Cultural anthropology, the study of people and the development of their societies, right? Philosophical anthropology, the understanding of people as both creatures and creators of their own environment. Think about that. So if you think about her characters, all this, fits into it. All right. In most of her novels, and including in her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, I want to talk a little bit about themes. So the themes she includes are the themes of voice, the themes of language, the themes of desire and love, race and racism, independence, power, judgment, and jealousy. All right. I like talking about the particular theme of voice and language, okay? Because I think that's how she brings the reader in to really identify with the characters that she creates through voice and language. Now, when she was writing, she could have written in standard English and made everything very proper. And that probably would have been like really, really boring. But that's not what she chose to do. She let her characters be themselves and they reveal themselves through their language. And what I'm talking about is like, she let them use colloquialism. She let them talk the way that they would actually talk. She let them use their idiosyncratic language. She did that. All right. But and that was in voice and language. But the other area she really explored was the area of faith. Okay. And I honestly don't think she could have been, my opinion again, a Black novelist who came from the South who did not discuss or have some type of faith implications in what she wrote. Okay. An interesting thing about her use of faith and her exploration of faith is that she had her own personal journey with faith. And as such, it turns out that she was an atheist. And she writes about this in her book, Dust Tracks on a Road, that was published in 1942. And what she says about this, I'm going to read directly from the book, because just to let you know what she thinks about this and what she says about this. She says, you wouldn't think the person who was born with God in the house would ever have any questions to ask on the subject. As I grew, the questions went to sleep in me. I just said the words, made the motions, and went on. My father being a preacher and my mother superintendent of the Sunday school, I naturally was always having to do with religious ceremony. The thing slept on in me until my college years without any real decision. And I made the necessary motions and forgot to think. But when I studied both history and philosophy, the struggle began again. And, that was an awakening for her. And then she goes on to say, I went to thinking and questioning again, and I achieved a certain peace within myself, but perhaps the seeking after the inner heart of truth will never cease in me. Finally, she states that the unreachable and therefore the unknowable always seems divine, hence religion. And here's something that's really good. She says, people need religion because the great masses fear life and its consequences, and it gives them a feeling of security. I do not pretend to read God's mind. If he has a plan of the universe worked out to the smallest detail, it would be folly for me to presume to get down on my knees and attempt to revise it. So she's not going to question it. She's not going to challenge it. That to me seems the highest form of sacrilege. So I do not pray. She says she doesn't pray. So she feels like she doesn't want to be a hypocrite. It seems to me that organized creeds are collections of words around a wish, and I feel no need for such. However, I would not by word or deed attempt to deprive another of the consolation it affords. It is simply not for me. So basically what she says is that despite her own religious conflicts, or basically I think that she used the power of religion to convince people of the need and that there was something that they could depend upon to carry on in their lives. So, why did Zora Neale Hurston write? I think she was driven to write. I think she was compelled to tell the stories of her people, our people, of Black people, and society. I think if she hadn't had that kind of a drive to tell these stories, the need to tell these stories, that she probably would have done something where she could have made like a decent living, something that paid her a living wage. All right, but obviously she didn't care about money, and she kept, she did survive on several fellowships during the course of her career, as well as when she published some things, she did get some money, but obviously she didn't get enough to make her rich. I think I read somewhere once that she had gotten like around $900 for one of her novels. That time, that was probably a lot of money too. So why does she write? She wrote to tell her story, I think. She wrote to tell the story of Black Americans at that time. I think she wrote to leave a legacy. I think she wanted Black people to be remembered and to be remembered accurately and appropriately. I think she wanted to leave something for Black children to learn from and to know. But also I could say, she wrote because she had the passion. So in the end, this woman died in Florida. It was in Fort Pierce, Florida. And she was in a county-run nursing home, alone and penniless. I mean, she'd had several marriages during her lifetime that ended. She never had any children. I don't know what happened with all the, the siblings that she had, if there were nieces and nephews, but regardless, she died alone. And she was buried in an unmarked grave, in a place called the Garden of Heavenly Rest in Fort Pierce. And it wasn't until like Alice Walker wanted to find her grave, and back in the 70s went to the Garden of Heavenly Rest in Fort Pierce and walked through the weeds and whatever else is there to finally find her grave, which was unmarked. And she finally got an appropriate grave marker for Alice Walker. Earlier in her life, way before she died, before she died, Zora Neale Hurston had proposed to someone, and I can't remember who it was, that a fund should be set up so that when artists died, that they could be buried appropriately and have headstones and be remembered, but no one ever took her up on that. And so despite the fact that she had such a lonely, sad ending, her body of work is incredible. It's really a shame that she wasn't recognized for the great artist that she was until after she died, and that she was never able to reap any financial reward from that. And that's where I'll end. I don't know.
So,
Nzima?
I do have a question. Do you think that Zora Neale Hurston body of work should be like mandated reading, like reading that people should, before they graduate high school or should have been introduced, um, and just so we can explore, understand, her not only her legacy, but it highlights our language, the culture, and when she lived, it tells stories in a candid way. Would
Mhm.
you?
I would say, I could say yes to that. I really could. And one of the reasons I would say yes to that is because remember I had said that I think a lot of her work is based in anthropological study, because the way she's writing it is she's looking at society through a particular lens, and her own particular lens of looking at society had to do with how society functioned. I think it's a lesson in how society functions. Did I
Hmm.
answer your question?
Yes,
I,
I
I
think
had a
so.
question. I had a question in regards to how she was received by other artists. I do know that I read that a lot of other artists, they pushed back on her in regards to the language she was using in her books, and they didn't want her to use that down home country language.
Right.
So I'm just curious as to how she was received by her audience in that at that time and other fellow artists.
It's really hard for me to talk about how she was received by other fellow artists at the time. I did touch on the topic of her use of language, right? You know,
Mhm.
and I don't think she could have done it any other way and been true to her art form at the time, because
Mhm.
the language is how she well, the language is part of her characters. So if she were to change the language, then her characters would lack a certain type of reality. That's what I think. They wouldn't be real.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some of the
Okay. Okay.
So I
there's a
think we also have people within our own and within the community, even to this day. I think just thinking about um, people in the community who have a standard within ourselves. It's great to have standards, but I think it's still a situation right now, where we want to write in a certain language with our jargon and our verbiage or whatever. I think that we have um, people within our same community that look like us who judge us harshly, and them themselves turn the nose up maybe with you know things that actually see ourselves or is written in our voice. Do you agree? Do you think that it was a great thing for Zara Neale Hurston
well,
to stay true?
I think that the way she used language gave authenticity to her characters.
Mhm.
That's my
Okay. Wow. So we just did a book chat discussing, well, not completed, we haven't completed the book chat um, of hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick. We're in the
Mhm,
middle of diving into it.
mhm.
And I just, when you mention marking graves or respecting our literary legends, um, I think it is important to create those spaces and to make sure that we have someone like you, a historian, English, a professor who makes sure to include, our writing. I believe that, we have a Faye on as well. So do you have a question? We have a Faye that might have a
Yes.
question.
Oh my gosh.
This
And congratulations, Nzima and Hartford's Lit. Y'all are doing it today. I love it. I love it. I'm wearing my Zora Neale
Thank you.
Hurston earrings that I got from People Get Ready. Okay.
Nice.
Love them.
I mean,
Beautiful.
like Zora Neale Hurston was like who inspired when I read Their Eyes Are Watching God for the first time when I was in high school. I was like, oh. So, but I wanted to say, because she was an anthropologist and historian, she was writing like you said earlier, the voices were from the people, and
Right.
and a lot of times, like and you had a panel on earlier that was also talking about, like, a lot of our writers, African American writers now, are self-published because the white publishers don't recognize our language. We're writing for our people, from our voices, and from the communities that we're familiar with. So I think that it's innovative at any time, because anything that is purely Black and from us, is for us and by us, is always looked upon as something less than, even by some of our own people who may be educated, and then if they see somebody write ain't or whatever.
It's like when people are when writers are writing, they're writing for a particular audience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you're writing for your audience, whatever you determine that to be, I don't think that you're thinking about, well, will the whole wide world read this? But you're writing to your people.
Exactly.
And as I said earlier, I think it's important that she wrote the way she did, because it lends to the authenticity and the believability of the characters that she's creating. I know it's fiction, but despite that, characters have to be believable. Okay? There has to be a reason for someone to continue to turn the pages. And the readers want to be able to relate to the characters. Consequently, you have to be true. You have to be authentic, whatever authenticity is for you.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I love that she used in her writing too was to talk and speak to the superstitions of the time, and how the many different beliefs that people have, and she wove that in there into her writings, and she was very free about it. So it was very interesting for me to find out that that she, even though she was an atheist, but she was still able to, I guess because her father was a minister, to write from that perspective too, and some of her stories about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And even though she was an atheist, that was personal for her. She didn't like hold it against other people that they had religious faith. And she really understood the importance of it and the meaning of religious faith for other people. It just didn't work for her.
Okay.
But she wrote from an authentic, for me, in reading all her work, she wrote from an authentic place of the people at that time.
Yes.
And that's what keeps her work timeless, because
exactly.
the fortitude of Janie in Their Eyes Are Watching God can be an inspiration for women.
Right. Because
are
it's an age-old story. And guess
exactly.
what? Despite the fact that it was so long ago, it doesn't change. Human behavior basically does not change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the old man that was sitting around at the store could be the same brothers at the barbershop today.
Yes. Yes. He had to get surgery to get his hair cut. It is true. So we see our commonalities. It reveals things to us that, things have happened. We've been here before, and, there's some things that we may not have faced before, or never will ever face, but at least we can see the different evolution, the different changes, and then relate to it. It's beautiful. I think
Yeah.
we
Or
need to
it
push
can
that.
inspire people. It can also inspire people to feel like whatever they're going through isn't new, and
Right.
there are others that are going through it, and sometimes that helps people when they're going through something.
Yes.
Right.
Whatever emotion, whatever time in their life they're going through, it's like, oh, well, there's somebody else going through the same thing, and that also speaks to our literature
Right.
now, like what people are writing about, and what a lot of the writers that we've seen today were inspired by their own experience, people writing from their own personal experiences in their lives, and finding out after they publish their book that other people are going through the same thing, and it's making them connect.
Right.
And that's
Right.
a beautiful thing, because we need to connect with each other in
Yeah.
a whole lot of ways. Like the Harlem Renaissance writers connected. They came together because it wasn't a community of writers. Hartford's literary integrated trailblazers are together because they're supporting each other, and these artists all over.
And Elm City Lit.
Yeah. I like how you talked about the fact that about she spoke from where the characters were, because that makes the characters universal, so relatable, no matter when you read it, and no matter how old you are when you read it, because the characters are universal, and life is life, and it's a circle, and it keeps happening, so you
Right.
can learn lessons from it. So I like how you said that.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you so much. That
We're
was our panel
up.
with Dr. Professor Marilyn Turner. We
Yes.
gratefully appreciate you coming and talking with us about Zora Neale Hurston and all of the great things that
Wait,
she
can
did.
I do just say hugging you through the screen? Professor Turner is my English teacher, and I wrote my first little piece in her class and had my opportunity. And I just wanted to give shout outs and say love, love, love.
Love
Thank
love
you.
back to you. Thank you.